The night looked perfect. Golden string lights zigzagged across the backyard, draped between the old maple trees and the white fence, casting a soft honeyed glow over the long buffet table. Platters of roasted chicken, bowls of pasta salad, and slices of cheesecake were lined up in perfect symmetry. Wine glasses clinked in casual rhythm, mingling with the low hum of jazz spilling from a speaker tucked near the patio door. My mom's rose bushes gave the air a faint sweetness, blending with the scent of grilled vegetables drifting from the barbecue. The late summer breeze carried a warmth that felt almost staged. From the outside, it could have been a picture on a postcard: laughter, hugs, and the comfort of family. But from the inside, I could feel the hairline cracks running through it all. As I walked across the yard, weaving between little clusters of relatives, cousins I hadn't seen in months, uncles leaning back in lawn chairs with beers in hand, conversations shifted. Some trailed off mid-sentence, replaced by polite smiles that didn't quite meet their eyes. I caught the glances. Quick, measured, like I was something they didn't want to be caught looking at too long. Melissa, my older sister, stood dead center in the patio's glow, as if the lights had been strung just for her. Her navy dress skimmed the ground, her curls were perfect, and the stem of her Chardonnay glass caught every glint from the overhead bulbs. She was talking animatedly to our aunt, one hand brushing the air in elegant arcs. Melissa always knew how to draw a crowd without ever asking for it. She also knew how to end someone with just a sentence. I'd been on the receiving end more times than I cared to count. I was halfway to the drink cooler when her voice sliced through the music. "Claire," she called, sharp but sugar-coated enough to make people turn. Dozens of heads swiveled. "You're out of this family, and maybe now you'll stop leeching off us like you always have." The words hit like a slap wrapped in glass. Somewhere near the grill, a fork clattered against a plate. The laughter evaporated like steam. Even the saxophone from the speaker seemed to stutter before looping back to the start. The sting wasn't just the exile. It was how perfectly she'd chosen her moment mid-toast, in full view, when my hands were empty and every gaze was free to land on me. She'd aimed for the softest part of me, the part that had fought to rebuild after mistakes she never let me forget. My cheeks burned hot, my pulse thudded in my ears. For a second, the old instinct clawed at me, shrink, vanish, let Melissa claim the entire stage like always. But not tonight. I stepped forward until the light touched my face. The crowd shifted subtly, as if making space for a scene they couldn't look away from. Melissa's smile tightened, the corners of her eyes crinkling in anticipation. "Careful, Melissa," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to carry. "You might beg me to come back before this night is over." A ripple moved through the group, a gasp here, a whispered, "Oh my God," there. One of our cousins froze mid-bite, eyes darting between us. My aunt's mouth pinched shut, like she'd swallowed something bitter. Melissa blinked twice, a crack in her composure, before forcing a laugh. "In your dreams," she said, swirling her wine like she'd just swatted away a fly. But I didn't look away. I held her gaze for one deliberate beat longer than manners allowed, until I saw the faintest flicker of doubt behind her confidence. She didn't know what I knew, not yet. The truth was, I had the one thing that could flip this family's balance of power in an instant. Melissa thought she'd just humiliated me. In reality, she'd given me the perfect audience. As I stepped past her toward the buffet, the music slowly seeped back in. Conversations resumed in halting starts, but the current had changed. People were watching us now, and by the time the last string light dimmed tonight, Melissa's control over me would be nothing but a memory. Melissa had always been the sun in our family's solar system, and the rest of us just orbited around her. As the eldest of three, she'd been handed the unspoken title of the responsible one, the leader, the voice of reason. Somewhere along the way, that had hardened into the one whose word is law. And in our family, challenging Melissa's word was like stepping into a courtroom without a lawyer. I was the youngest, the afterthought, some would say. My brother Daniel, the middle child, had found his escape in a corporate job 3 states away. I'd taken a different route, one Melissa never understood. I'd left home in my early 20s, moving to a small coastal town, working freelance design gigs, traveling when I could. To her, that life screamed instability. To me, it was freedom. But in her eyes, freedom looked a lot like failure. Every holiday, every gathering, I could feel the subtle digs. "Still working on that design thing? When are you going to settle down like the rest of us?" She'd smile when she said it, but her tone always drew an invisible line between her real life and my pretend one. The tension had been simmering for years, but recently the pot had started to boil. A few weeks before tonight's party, a family group chat had blown up over a single topic: the house. Not just any house, the one our grandparents had built with their own hands, in the 1952nd. White clapboard siding, a wraparound porch, the same oak tree out front that my dad used to climb as a kid. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was the spine of our family history. But to Melissa, it was a number on a real estate listing. She'd been pushing hard to sell it. The market was perfect, she said. We could split the money 3 ways: pay off debts, invest, whatever. On paper, it made sense. Emotionally, it felt like bulldozing our roots. In the chat, I'd tried to raise the idea of keeping it, renting it out, using it for family gatherings, preserving it for the next generation. Melissa's response? A clipped, "Claire, you're not even here enough to care." Daniel stayed neutral as always, which in our family politics was just another way of letting Melissa win. What Melissa didn't know, what no one knew, was that before Grandma passed last year, she'd called me to her bedside. Her voice was thin, her hand cooler than I wanted to admit. She'd pressed a worn manila envelope into my palm. "Promise me," she'd whispered, "you'll keep this house in the family, no matter what anyone says." Inside the envelope was the shock that had kept me up for nights after the funeral, a legal document giving me the final say over the property. Grandma had never trusted Melissa's practicality when it came to sentimental things. She knew Melissa saw dollar signs where others saw memories. So she'd skipped over the natural order and given the youngest, the so-called drifter, the power card. I'd kept it to myself, partly because I wasn't ready for the war it would start, partly because a small, stubborn part of me wanted to see just how far Melissa would go if she thought I was powerless. And now, here she was, standing in the center of the backyard, glass in hand, announcing to the world that I was out of the family. It wasn't just an insult, it was a calculated move. If she could publicly discredit me, make me look like an outsider, then when the house came up in conversation tonight, no one would care what I had to say. I scanned the crowd in that split second after her words landed. Aunt Marlene's brows knit together, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Uncle Ted stared into his drink like it might give him an escape route. Even the cousins I barely knew were watching, eyes darting between us like they were ringside at a boxing match. Melissa stood tall, chin lifted, lips curved in that faint smile she wore when she thought she'd already won. She didn't just want to hurt me, she wanted the audience to witness it. Public humiliation was her favorite sport. My mind flashed, unbidden, to the last real conversation I'd had with Grandma. The faint smell of lavender lotion on her skin, the way her fingers had squeezed mine, despite the weakness in her grip. Her voice, fragile but unshakable, repeating that promise. No matter what anyone says. That memory lit something inside me, something Melissa couldn't see yet. She thought this was checkmate. What she didn't realize was that she'd just set the stage for me. All these aunts and uncles, cousins and in-laws, the ones she wanted to convince I didn't belong, were now laser-focused on us. Every glass of wine, every fork of potato salad was forgotten. The court of family opinion was wide open, and Melissa had handed me the microphone without even knowing it. I glanced at Daniel, leaning against the fence, nursing his beer. He looked uneasy, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, but he didn't step in. He never did. That was fine. I didn't need backup. Not tonight. Because before the night was over, they'd all hear the truth. And Melissa? She'd wish she'd kept her mouth shut. For a few seconds, I didn't move. The backyard, with its glowing string lights and warm summer air, suddenly felt like the stage of an open-air arena. Every single pair of eyes was on me. Even the faint jazz music in the background seemed to have skipped a beat. Melissa stood a few feet away, her wine glass angled just so, her posture screaming control. That smile, tight-lipped, practiced, sat on her face like a crown she'd worn for decades. To her, this was the final nail, the public declaration that would seal my exile from the real family. Around us, the reactions unfolded like a slow-motion scene. Aunt Marlene suddenly found her napkin fascinating, folding and unfolding it with a precision that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Uncle Ted leaned back in his chair, taking an exaggerated sip of his beer, eyes fixed on the middle distance. The cousins on the far side of the yard, the ones who had always gravitated toward Melissa's confidence, exchanged small smirks, their laughter just loud enough for me to hear. A couple of them even raised their glasses in mock cheers, like Melissa had just delivered the punchline of the night. It was a familiar tableau. I'd been here before. Different occasions, different digs, same dynamic. Melissa had always known how to pull the rug out from under me. In public, the innocent comments about my career, the side jokes about my dating life, the not so subtle reminders of who really mattered in this family. And each time, I'd done what was expected: smile, swallow it, move on. But tonight was different. Tonight, I could feel the heat of something far stronger than embarrassment rising in my chest. It wasn't shame, it was focus. I let my gaze move slowly across the yard, meeting the eyes of anyone brave enough to look at me. Most flinched away. A few held my gaze for a second, curiosity flickering behind their polite masks. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to get a show. My mind flickered to a series of sharp, fragmented memories: Melissa taking the last cookie from Grandma's kitchen jar and blaming me for it. Melissa accidentally leaving me off the guest list for her engagement party. Melissa telling everyone at a family reunion that I just couldn't commit to anything, while I stood right there. Those moments had stung at the time, but now they were kindling, and I had the match. I caught sight of the long buffet table near the back porch. Plates of grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and desserts were laid out in neat rows. But it wasn't the food that drew my attention, it was the thin leather portfolio sitting at the far end, tucked behind a bowl of fruit salad. I knew that portfolio, Melissa's official paperwork for selling the house. She must have brought it tonight, planning to corner the family after a few drinks and get their signatures before anyone could think too hard. The thought made my pulse quicken, not from panic but from possibility. She thought she was in control, that she'd caught me unprepared. She had no idea she'd walked into a trap she'd set for herself. Melissa took a slow sip of her wine, still smiling, her eyes scanning the crowd like a queen acknowledging her subjects. "It's just reality," she said lightly, as if to soften the blow. "Some people just don't belong anymore." A few scattered chuckles followed. I tilted my head, studying her, letting a small smile tug at my lips. "Interesting choice of words," I said, loud enough to carry across the yard. That got their attention. Heads turned. The laughter stopped. Even the kids playing near the fence seemed to quiet. Melissa's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, quick enough that most people wouldn't notice. But I saw it. I always saw it. In that silence, I felt something shift. I wasn't the one being backed into a corner anymore. I was holding the door closed, and Melissa didn't even realize she was locked inside. Somewhere deep inside, Grandma's voice echoed. No matter what anyone says. I could almost feel the weight of that manila envelope in my hands again. I didn't need to humiliate her right now. Not yet. Let her think she'd won the round. Let her relax. The more confident she felt, the harder the fall would be. I glanced again at the buffet table, at that leather portfolio sitting there like a loaded weapon in plain sight. Tonight, she'd try to use it against me. Tonight, I'd turn it on her. I straightened my shoulders, breaking eye contact with Melissa, and scanning the crowd one more time. Every detail, the shifting postures, the forced smiles, the way Daniel was watching us from the fence with narrowed eyes, was a piece of the game board in my head. She'd declared me out of the family. Fine. Before the night was over, she'd realized she was the one standing on the edge, and when she fell, everyone here would remember who pushed. The crowd thinned as the music swelled again, conversations splintering into smaller clusters. The tension from Melissa's public declaration still lingered in the air like smoke after a bonfire, acrid, heavy, impossible to ignore. I was refilling my water glass at the drinks table when I sensed her approach. Melissa didn't rush. She moved like someone who believed the ground itself made way for her. Her heels clicked softly on the patio stone, the rhythm slow and deliberate. She leaned in close enough that her perfume, something expensive, sharp with a sweet undercurrent mixed with the scent of the chilled wine in her hand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You should head out early, Claire," she murmured, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "No point dragging this out. You've already embarrassed yourself enough for one night." I let the words hang there, watching the small satisfaction flicker in her gaze. She thought this was the finishing blow, the quiet shove toward the exit. Setting down my glass, I met her eyes. "Embarrassed?" I said softly, my tone measured, almost curious. "Melissa, are you sure you want to keep playing it this way? In front of everyone?" Her brow arched, just slightly. "Playing it? Yes," I said, tilting my head. "Because if you keep pushing, we might have to start talking about things that affect everyone here, and I don't think you want that." Her smirk twitched, the smallest crack in her carefully constructed mask. She recovered quickly, taking a slow sip of wine. "You don't have anything that could touch me, Claire." I smiled just a fraction, enough to make her notice. "That's an interesting assumption." She blinked. That was all I needed that half second where the certainty wavered. In that tiny gap, the power shifted. I didn't have to spell it out. The implication was enough. Melissa glanced over my shoulder toward the buffet table, where the leather portfolio still sat untouched. She looked back at me, her expression tightening, though she hid it under the cover of another sip. "You think you can make trouble for me over the house?" she asked, still low, but with a sharper edge now. I didn't answer directly. "Let's just say," I murmured, leaning in until my words brushed her ear, "I have a bigger say in that decision than you might think." Her grip tightened slightly on her wineglass. She didn't respond right away, and that silence was almost as satisfying as the look in her eyes. She was calculating now, reassessing the game board she thought she controlled. I straightened, stepping back just enough to let her know this conversation was over for now. "Enjoy the party, Melissa," I said, my voice calm, even warm. "It's going to be memorable." As I turned away, I caught a glimpse of her in my peripheral vision, standing still, shoulders a little tenser than before, her gaze darting toward the small groups around the yard, as if measuring who might already suspect something. The rest of the guests were oblivious to the undercurrent, chatting about weekend plans and complimenting the potato salad. But a few people, the ones who paid attention to more than words, had seen us. Aunt Marlene's eyes followed me as I crossed the yard, her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel, leaning against the fence, gave me the smallest nod, as if to say, "I saw that." Inside, I could feel the momentum tilting. For years, Melissa had been the one whispering in corners, making quiet cuts while the rest of the family laughed along. Now, for the first time, she was the one on uncertain footing. I didn't need to expose everything yet. Not here, not in the shadows by the drinks table. The reveal had to be public, undeniable, and timed for maximum impact. The thought of it was a steady hum in my veins, a slow-building charge. I could already picture the moment. The crowd hushed, Melissa cornered, every eye watching as the truth landed. Melissa thought she was warning me to avoid humiliation. What she didn't realize was that I was already setting the stage for hers. As the night pressed on, laughter swelled again, glasses clinked, and the soft strum of a guitar floated in from the porch. But beneath the warm light and easy chatter, a countdown had started one. Melissa didn't know she was on. The backyard buzzed with the kind of energy that comes after a few glasses of wine laughter blending with the soft hum of the jazz band, the glow of string lights making everything look almost too perfect. It was the perfect moment to break it. I set my drink down on the buffet table and stepped toward the center of the yard. My heels clicked against the stone path, a sharp sound that cut through the music. Conversations trailed off, one by one, until the only noise was the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" I said, my voice steady but carrying. Heads turned, chairs scraped the patio as people shifted to face me. Even the band stopped playing. Melissa was still by the drinks table, her glass of white wine halfway to her lips. I caught the faint flicker of confusion in her eyes before she set it down. "I think," I began, "there's been a little misunderstanding tonight about where we all stand, and more importantly, about this family's home." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. I let it settle before I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick, folded document. The edges were worn, the paper soft from being handled. "This," I said, holding it up, "is Grandma's final will and testament. Most of you probably assumed Melissa would handle things, and Melissa certainly acted like she would. But that's not exactly how Grandma saw it." Melissa's smile froze in place, a perfect mask just starting to crack. I unfolded the paper with deliberate slowness, the sound of the creases opening loud in the hush. In her own words, I continued, "Grandma left full and final decision-making authority over the house to me. Not shared, not conditional, mine." The words seemed to hang in the air. I could see them land on each person's face. The raised brows, the sudden stillness, the darting glances between spouses. Someone whispered, "You're kidding," but no one laughed. Melissa took a step forward. "Claire, this is—" I didn't let her finish. "Exactly what it says," I cut in, my tone sharp but calm. "Grandma trusted me to do what's best for everyone. That's what she wrote. That's what's legally binding." From the far side of the yard, Uncle Jeff muttered, "Well, that changes things." And the murmurs grew louder. A couple of cousins exchanged looks, their earlier smirks gone. Melissa tried to reclaim the floor, her voice a little higher than before. "Claire, you're making a scene over something we could have—" "A scene?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. Melissa, you told me in front of all these people that I was out of the family. I think a little clarity is overdue. Her cheeks flushed, though whether from anger or the wine, I couldn't tell. She folded her arms, but her fingers twitched against her sleeve. Grandma's words, I went on, reading directly from the page now. I leave the final authority over my home to my granddaughter Claire, who has always respected the history and meaning of this place. Gasps. A few people actually turned to look at Melissa, as if expecting her to explain away the ink on the page. She didn't. Instead, she forced a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Well, she said, that's certainly unexpected. I met her gaze, holding it. Unexpected for you, maybe, but for me? I've known for months, and I've been quiet out of respect, but tonight, you made that impossible. The tension was almost tangible now, a pressure you could feel against your skin. Melissa's eyes darted toward the buffet, then the door to the house, as if weighing her escape routes. I folded the document back up, slid it into my bag, and straightened. I'm not selling the house, I said simply. Not now, not ever, it's staying in the family for everyone, and that's final. There was a pause, the kind of silence that's almost deafening before the applause started. It wasn't loud at first, but it grew, cousin after cousin, aunt after uncle, until even the band members were clapping. Melissa stood there, still smiling, but her knuckles were white around the stem of her wine glass. She knew she'd lost more than an argument. She'd lost the image she'd carefully cultivated for years, the unchallenged leader of the family. I gave her one last nod, not of victory, but of inevitability, before stepping back toward my table. The music resumed, the conversation started up again, but something fundamental had shifted. And Melissa felt it as deeply as I did. It happened gradually, not a crash, but a slow implosion. The moment the applause faded, Melissa's whole posture shifted. The defiant lift of her chin was gone, replaced by something smaller, tighter. She lingered near the drinks table as people resumed their conversations, but her eyes kept flicking toward me. Finally, she crossed the yard, her heels silent now, her voice pitched low. Claire, she began, and there was a tremor in it I had never heard before. We need to talk. I set down my glass, meeting her halfway. About what? She hesitated. Her eyes darted around as if making sure no one was listening. Look, maybe I was out of line earlier. I was just frustrated. But you and I were sisters. We should be on the same side. I almost laughed. You mean your side? She flinched, then forced a quick smile. Our side, she corrected. Think about it. If we worked together, we could get a much better deal for the house. We could... You mean sell it? I cut in. She pressed her lips together. Claire, it's a lot of money. Enough for you to finally... Finally what? I asked, my voice still calm but sharper now. Finally, be something worth your approval? Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked away, down at the patio stones between us. For the first time that night, she wasn't performing for an audience. This was Melissa stripped down to something uncomfortably human, desperate. Around us, I could feel the shift. Earlier, every conversation had pivoted toward her. Now, eyes were drifting our way, but not with deference, with curiosity. People weren't waiting for Melissa to lead anymore. They were waiting for me. You don't have to decide now, she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. Just don't shut the door completely. We could announce a joint decision later. Show everyone we're united. United, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air like smoke. Melissa, the only thing you were united with tonight was your own ego. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake, she said, softer now. I shouldn't have said what I did in front of everyone. I just thought... You thought you could push me out, I said flatly. And you almost did, but you forgot something. Her eyes flicked up. What? That grandma saw through you a long time ago. The words landed like a slap, though I hadn't raised my voice. She took a half step back, and in that moment I realized something I hadn't before the balance of power wasn't just tipped my way. It had collapsed entirely onto my side. People nearby were pretending not to listen, but the subtle tilt of their heads gave them away. Melissa knew they were hearing every word, and it was killing her. Claire, she tried again, lowering her voice to a near whisper. If you hold on to that house, it's going to be a burden. Taxes, upkeep, you don't want that responsibility. Let me help you. We can handle it together. I don't need your help, I said simply. What I need is for you to respect my decision. Her jaw tightened, but there was fear under it now. Not fear of losing the house, fear of losing her role. The unspoken queen of the family was being quietly dethroned, and she could feel the crown slipping. I leaned in just enough for only her to hear. Before tonight is over, you'll understand something important. Sometimes the only way to win is to walk away. Her brows drew together. What does that mean? You'll see, I said, stepping back. That was the moment I saw it, the flicker of uncertainty in her, the realization that she no longer controlled the narrative. And I wasn't done yet. The night air felt heavier now, not from heat, but from the weight of every unspoken question hanging in the backyard. Conversations had dulled to a murmur. Even the string lights seemed to cast a sharper glow, as if they too were waiting for me to make my move. I stepped toward the center of the patio, the sound of my heels tapping against the stone, pulling eyes in my direction. Melissa lingered near the drinks table, her smile fixed but brittle. I began, my voice carrying easily over the quiet. There's been enough confusion tonight, so let's clear it up. A ripple went through the crowd. My mother looked anxious. My father's brows knitted, but he didn't interrupt. I've been given something, I continued, something that was meant to protect what matters most to our family. Grandma's will give me final say over the house. Not to sell it, not to cash it out, but to preserve it. Melissa's smile faltered. Just a fraction, but it was enough for the people in the front to notice. This house, I said, scanning the group, isn't just walls and a roof. It's where we've celebrated birthdays, mourned losses, and told stories that will outlive us. Selling it would erase more than just bricks and mortar, it would erase part of us. Someone in the back murmured their agreement. Others nodded slowly. That's why, I said, letting the pause hang, I'm not selling. The house stays in the family. It will be a shared space for all of us, for holidays, reunions, and maybe even those summer barbecues we pretend not to enjoy. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, the quiet applause started tentative at first, then building. The sound filled the yard like a wave. Melissa was trapped. In front of everyone, she had no choice but to nod, her voice tight as she said, Of course, that's fine. But I caught the flash in her eyes, not just anger, but the raw realization that she'd lost something she couldn't get back. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. Because here's the thing. Power isn't in the person who shouts the loudest or moves the fastest. It's in the person who knows exactly when to play their final card, and does it without flinching. That night, as the party slowly wound down, I stood in the doorway of the house, watching my family file out. I saw Melissa avoid my gaze, retreating into the night with her shoulders a little lower than when she'd arrived. I also saw the cousins who'd once stayed quiet now smiling as they passed me. A few even whispered, Good call. It wasn't about winning. It was about setting something right, protecting what deserved to be protected. And as I locked the door behind me, I thought about how many people out there have their own Melissa, someone who underestimates them, pushes them aside, and assumes they'll never push back. If you're watching this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've been in a room where someone made you feel small, and you wished you had the chance to change the ending. Sometimes, you get that chance. And when you do, you make sure it counts. This was mine. And if you've got your own real family drama, the kind no one would believe unless they lived it, stick around, because this channel is where those stories come alive. Subscribe, and next time, it might be your story that proves the quietest person in the room can change everything.